When people ask me about Bellevue, I have to preface it that my father was in the military and I am a military brat, so I've traveled from place to place. But in all of that traveling, Bellevue was a portion of my life that was very important, because I remember as a child, we would come to Bellevue and I would just think of this as just a magical place. I think my biggest memory of Bellevue was coming on Bellevue Road, seeing that pine tree that was shaped like a O. And I was just so fascinated with that, and that tree is still there. That was the first part, and then the next part would be coming and seeing my relatives. At the time when I was very little, my great-grandfather, Willie Boots, was still living, and he had a house there in which basically he had an outhouse and a whole bunch of hunting dog pits for his dogs, and a well that you would pump by hand, and that was very memorable. And then the highlight was taking the ferry boat. And there was just something magical about being on that ferry boat. Those are my fond memories of Bellevue. And we've been fortunate enough my father had enough insight to say that, you know, there is some history, that there is a story that needs to be told, and there is history that needs to be kept. My grandmother was always an avid reader, collector, and when she passed away, she asked my father to create a museum. And with the resources that he had at the time, what he did was he got one of the portable sheds, and he put a collection of her books and magazine articles, and that was called the Grandma Needs Museum. So that was my first experience with the collection. And the interesting part of that is that my father had asked my daughter to be the archivist for my grandmother's museum. Growing up, my family moved here back to the Eastern Shore in 1998. And during that process, just within that short period of time, we did see a lot of destruction of some of the older buildings of Bellevue. From my understanding, Bellevue was a self-sufficient African-American community, which was primarily based in the seafood industry. They did have a lot of supporting businesses associated with that, in terms of restaurants, church, juke joints, gas station. They even had their own baseball league, Negro Baseball League. Just during my period there, that short period of time, I did see the erosion or the destruction of some of those buildings, whether it was due to just disrepair, that it was just not salvageable anymore. And that was my first taste of the community starting to change, and beginning to possibly lose its identity. Fortunately, with the new community and with people who were not necessarily the natives of the Bellevue community moving in, I think that they were very sensitive to the heritage of the Bellevue community. And it was one in which people still got along with each other, and there wasn't anything to bring about a massive disruption of the community with buildings that were out of place, or that didn't appear to be appropriate for the community of Bellevue. And I think change did occur, but I have nothing against change. But I think that when you do change, that you do really need to respect and listen to the people who are going to be in the midst of that change as well. I think if the developer comes with a sense of, I really want to get your input, let's talk and see how we can make this work for both parties. I think that's the first thing. But if, on the other hand, if a developer comes in with preconceived notions that this is how it's going to be, without getting any buy-in from the community, that can be an issue. That sometimes the African American community does not have the resources or the financial resources to to say that you're not going to do this, or the know-how in terms of how that you're not going to do this. But I think that with Bellevue, what's been so fortunate and what I've been so happy about is that the community is a mixed community, and various degrees of educations, various professions, but how everybody has come together and said that this is a concern that we're having. Yeah, I'm not trying to block change, because change is inevitable. All I want to do is to just be responsible when we go through the change process, and be respectful of the people who've been living here for decades as well.